St. Andrews by the Sea, once a thriving fishing and tourism center, had by the 1990s fallen on hard times. Lucinda Flamer decided to do something about it. She would build a public garden for St. Andrews, her family's summer home for more than 70 years.
My parents were the second generation here, so my grandchildren are the fifth. We have been so fortunate in our lives. We've had an education, we've had opportunities, and continue to do so. If a little bit of this we can share, let's go for it.
The result is Kingsbrae, one of Canada's top 10 public gardens. And from providing work to serving people with special needs, the story of Kingsbrae is about the power of giving back. Located in St. Andrews by the Sea, on picturesque Passamaquoddy Bay, Kingsbrae Public Garden attracts more than 25,000 visitors a year. 2,500 plants spread over 27 acres. Kingsbrae's 8 gardens include a cook's garden, a gravel garden to teach water conservation, and features created just for kids. There's also a massive perennial garden enclosed by cedar hedges that date back to Lucinda Flamer's grandparents. Paths that wind their way through an old-growth forest, and ponds filled with fish and waterfowl. But Kingsbrae is much more than a tourist attraction. It's a refuge, a symbol of hope, and the realization of a dream.
I think the garden's changed my life because, first of all, it's worked. And you have a dream, and you feel totally convinced that you're going to do this. You haven't a clue how, but you really feel this is what you're going to do.
Lucinda Flamer's dream was to convert 27 acres of her family's estate into a world-class garden. The garden gates now stand on the site of her grandparents' summer home, and she has converted her parents' house into the garden cafe. Lucinda's summer home stands next to the garden. Every morning, she walks through a secret gate into a paradise filled with blissful childhood memories. In the 1930s and 40s, St. Andrews was a playground for some of Canada's wealthiest families, including Lucinda's.
It was fun. We lived in Montreal, and we all came down on the train. And our parents had the compartments, and the children were in the corridor, you know, the upper and lower berths. And it seems to me a lot of the mothers had Pekingese dogs, and they all hated each other. And we'd put suitcases up in the aisle to prevent the fights. Anyway, they had a lovely boozy trip down, and we all had, you know, we'd flip a coin who was in the top bunk and who was in the bottom bunk. And you were here the whole summer, from the moment school got out till it went back in again. I think when we were small, you always went to the beach. You were outside, you had picnics, you were busy, and there were lots of children.
In the 1990s, Lucinda and her husband John, a Dutch businessman, began to realize that they had more land than they needed. Rather than sell it, they wanted to use it to benefit the community. For both of them, the idea of giving back has a long family history.
Well, my mother-in-law, she was rather like my grandmother, I think, who always said, the smallest amount maybe a $5 bill with some guilders, but whatever, it will help somebody. It will help their dignity, and it will just give them confidence. And she believed it was not the great, big, colossal, show-offy things you did, but the small little things that gave people confidence and dignity. And I think she was absolutely right.
Following that example, the Flamers came up with their first plan. They offered to donate their land to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind for use as a school for seeing eye dogs.
We've supported CNIB for years, and we've supported these seeing eye dogs and special skill dogs, and we thought, wonderful, we had visions of this, all this space and whatnot. And CNIB came down and they looked at it all, and then you could hear a lot of clearing of throats as they tried to very politely tell us that, well, it's not going to work, you're too far from the city. So we were back to square one. I mean, we were crushed because we thought this was such a neat idea, and they were sort of feeling a little embarrassed that they had to say no. However, we were literally then hadn't the foggiest idea what we were going to do.
A project for the blind was put on the back burner as the Flamers looked around for a new idea. Little did they know, but the man who would help them find the right project was working in their own backyard. We'll be right back with more Recreating Eden. In 2001, Kingsbrae Garden was voted the best developed outdoor space in Canada. As its reputation has grown, so have the number of tourists in St. Andrews. Today, Kingsbrae plays an important role in the economy of this community. So it's hard to believe that 10 years ago, all this was little more than an idea. An idea hatched by the Flamers and a gardener named Andreas Hahn. At the time, Andreas was running a landscaping business, and the Flamers were among his wealthy clients. But he quickly discovered that Lucinda Flamer was anything but your average wealthy matron.
I had a young fellow working for me who'd spent a fair amount of time in jail, and this guy was a great gardener, and he was weeding away with me in one of the beds there, getting some things done, and his hands were all covered with tattoos and everything, and Mrs. Flamer went over and started talking to him and said, "Now what's this mean?" And he's like, "Oh, well, that meant this many years and not penitentiary." And I'm thinking, oh, I'm never working on this property again. But actually the opposite came out of it. She was intrigued by the story, and we got chatting about why I would hire somebody like that and be involved with somebody like that, and that's when we realized that we shared a lot of the same philosophies in life.
Over the next few years, the threesome began to formulate a plan to use the Flamers' land for a public garden that would help their ailing community. St. Andrews had changed drastically from the idyllic town of Lucinda's childhood, suffering heavily when the fishing industry slowed down. Unemployment and lack of opportunity brought despair.
In all of New Brunswick, and particularly St. Andrews, which is sort of our bailiwick, people need tremendous help. There's a lot of unemployment. There are a lot of unhappy people, and there are a lot of very unhealthy people. And John and I have always felt that a little bit can go a long way.
A beautiful public garden could make St. Andrews a popular destination once again. It would provide employment, and visitors would support the town's hotels and services. So the Flamers pitched a plan to the New Brunswick government. They'd donate the land and set up a garden trust. The government would forgive the land tax and provide operating grants. But there was still no money for the garden's construction.
We had to raise the money to build it, and that we had not anticipated.
We took the show on the road, and any bridge club, church group, service club, anybody that would be willing to give us an hour or two of our time, we pitched the idea to them, and just to make sure that we had good community support for it.
There wasn't one person who thought we could do it. Nobody. They thought we were absolutely mad. But we were so excited that we were going to do it or bust, you know.
And it was just overwhelming. We received more and more verbal support. And the morning after Town Council agreed to a rezoning of this property to allow the space, I came in the next morning and there was a big box of daylilies and iris that somebody had dug out of their garden with a little note, well, I guess you can use these now. And that to us was just a defining moment that it was going to happen. We were underway.
Despite the naysayers, Kingsbrae came in on time and on budget. Within a few years, it was drawing thousands of tourists to St. Andrews and changing the lives of the people who built it.
The people who planted the garden are all the people you will meet in the flower beds today, pushing barrows today, driving the mule today, behind the counter, behind the phones, everybody. And they really, it's been hard work. I mean, and these people work in miserable weather conditions, and they have done the most successful job. I mean, we wouldn't be here without them. They had been phenomenal, and none of them had done it before.
We had a fairly strict policy of not hiring professional gardeners in. We wanted people that needed employment, and we really didn't care too much about what their past experience and history was. We would provide the training here on site.
Sharon Olson is typical of that hiring philosophy. After her kids left home, Sharon tried to find work. But no one seemed to want a middle-aged woman with little training and no job experience, until she walked in for an interview at Kingsbrae.
And I didn't think I would get in because I was, when they get older, nobody wants to train somebody new. So I was lucky I got in. Everybody that works, we all say we're family. So it's nice. And it's nice to know you're part of the team and part of the family.
Kathy Buchanan feels much the same way. Shy and withdrawn, Kathy had trouble finding a steady job until she arrived at Kingsbrae. Among the first hired, she's been here ever since.
I seem to get along with people better because I'm around people more, and that's one thing about the garden too. You meet people from all over, and you're always hearing good comments about the garden, so it makes you feel good about what you're doing. Like we had a little fella in here, I think it's last week, and he was about 5 and he was with his mom and dad, and he was wandering around with them, and he come up to me and he said, "This is a beautiful garden. This is just so beautiful," he said, and it was so cute. You could hardly get it around his tongue.
I think it's changed, obviously, for each person in a different way. But I think probably it's given them a feeling of community. I think it's giving them, without a doubt, a feeling of accomplishment. I think they all look healthier and feel healthier and are healthier. And it's given them a chance for the future, which is all important for everybody, all of us.
I think a motto of the garden really is that we grow people as well as plants. We've had so many people come through here who've either found their calling here or elsewhere that we were instrumental in them knowing where they go.
Maybe you're going to just...
Well, no, definitely preferable. I think one of the things that the Flamers have brought to the project has been their sense of concern for people and for everybody who needs assistance.
How was your pizza? Good?
The belief that everybody has responsibility for somebody else. It doesn't matter how much you have or how little you have, there's always somebody with less, and you should always have a responsibility to help in whatever way you can.
You get them in range.
That sense of duty has informed Lucinda Flamer's life.
How's it look from
It
your
came
side,
from her
Ellie?
family and from her school.
I went to boarding school for years, and we had an incredibly good headmistress known as Gilly, Miss Gillard. And every morning after prayer, she had a few sort of words of wisdom. I remember one of the things she said was, the more you have, the more responsibility you have. And I don't think she meant intangibles. I think she meant the more opportunity, the more education you have, the more responsibility you have to those who don't. And that, again, at whatever young age, sort of sat there somewhere dormant for a long time.
The garden is never far from Lucinda Flamer's mind. and a chance visit to another garden in South Africa would bring a dormant idea back to life and create a special place for people whose garden needs are often overlooked. Recreating Eden will return with more of The Giving Garden. Broad, level paths that meander through a stunning display of 50,000 plants and trees, Kingsbrae Public Garden is designed to be accessible to people of all ages and all abilities, whether you travel on foot, in a wheelchair, or a golf cart. But there was another group Lucinda Flamer wanted to include in the garden. And in 2001, Kingsbrae's Sense and Sensitivity Garden opened, inspired by a visit to South Africa's Kirstenbosch Gardens, where the Flamers were delighted to discover a garden for the blind.
We were so impressed that, first of all, that they had it, and secondly, it was something that was possible for us to copy. So when nobody was looking, I would sort of walk around and measure on my hip. So, okay, it could be this height, and then I'd make little drawings in a book about sort of the configuration. So it's a steal.
We sometimes forget that a garden isn't just a visual experience. In the Sense and Sensitivity Garden, plants are chosen for their texture and perfume and planted in high beds so that visitors can touch the plants or lean in for a delicious smell. Every year, a group from the CNIB is bussed in for a special celebration at Kingsbrae. They're treated to lunch, live music, and a tour of their own special garden.
Oh, hi, Lucinda. Good to see you.
Patty King has been coming to this event from the beginning. She's the garden's biggest fan, and she knows just about everyone at Kingsbrae. Before the Sense and Sensitivity Garden was completed, Patty was invited to do a test run, and she had lots of ideas on how to improve it.
Being sighted, I have no idea how I would normally find my way around. So I needed that feedback from her to say, you know what, that's a little far away. I probably wouldn't lean forward to try to touch something. I'd be afraid of losing my balance because I can't see what's there and that type of thing. So it just brought into place concerns about placement and things like that. And yes, that height is good, that works, and those type of things. So very much that feedback was crucial to us.
Much to her delight, all of Patty's suggestions were incorporated into the final garden.
It was kind of cool, and that's why I say it's my garden, because I got to see what was wrong with it. I got to fix it the way it needs to be fixed, and it's just a wonderful garden.
Everyone visiting this garden seems to find an experience created just for them.
I could smell all the flowers and the spices and everything on my fingers. My fingers don't smell very good right now. They smell all sorts of stuff. I know I can't see, but I really enjoy it. I think it's very well organized for people who can't see. And it's something that you look forward to once a year.
Recreating Eden will be back with the conclusion of The Giving Garden. Whether she's doling out ladybugs or digging in the dirt, Lucinda Flamer has found her passion in Kingsbrae Garden. Yet as a child, she had absolutely no interest in plants.
I did not like gardens at all growing up. I mean, I had to pick flowers in the garden, to have a vase of flowers in my room, and I hated every single flower I picked, and they were usually sweet peas, which take ages. As I don't know that much about plants, I just sort of yank them out and put them somewhere else because I think they look all right. So I try to do it from a visual point of view.
The stunning results are a combination of Lucinda Flamer's artistic sense and Andreas Hahn's knowledge of plants and design. A perfect team.
We have a lot of fun in the garden. We think a lot alike. We have a lot of the same ideas. We're forever out there getting our hands dirty and moving things around. And probably some of the days that we have the most fun is when it's just her and I and a digging fork and, oh, let's move this one here and that one there. And we just get to do what both of us just love to do, and that's just garden.
We are always looking ahead because we can't resist it. I sort of sometimes wonder if we should stop, you know, but he likes being creative and so do I. And we're always just, you know, testing our ideas on each other.
And they pick up those ideas all over the world. Every fall, Andreas and the Flamers scour gardens around the globe, looking for new plants and ideas. But no future plan is more important than keeping their family of workers employed year-round. At the moment, much of the work is seasonal, but the Flamers are determined to change that.
So we found a few options already. We've purchased a woodlot and we harvest firewood, so that extends the year for a couple of people. We now have enough signs and maintenance and things like that that need painting and repairing all season long, that we have one person in our wood shop who's now here pretty well year-round. But we'd also, down the road, like to go into commercial production of organic vegetables. And it would be a nice tie-in both to our philosophy here as far as environmental concerns, but also to our employment philosophy.
Who could doubt that Lucinda and her team will make it happen? After all, they've achieved every goal they ever set for Kingsbrae. Maybe that's because in this garden, everything that's freely given seems to come back tenfold. And how would her family, the people who once vacationed on this land, feel about the Kingsbrae garden? According to Lucinda, they'd be well pleased.
I think they both, my parents would be, and my grandparents, that the property is still alive and doing all right. The nicest thing about this whole project is it's alive and it's green. It hasn't been spoiled. We've kept a green zone for, we hope, generations and generations.
Growing plants and growing people. This is Lucinda Flamer's legacy. A giving garden, created as a gift for her community.